There is a specific kind of darkness in a Los Angeles alleyway at 3 in the morning. It is not the quiet, peaceful darkness of the country. It is a vibrating, electric darkness. It hums with the exhaust of the city. In the late 1960s, Johnny Cash was standing in that darkness. He was shivering, though the California air was warm. To the rest of the world, he was the man in black. He was a towering figure of American music, a voice that sounded like it had been carved out of the earth itself. He was selling out stadiums. He was a television star. He was a legend. But in that alleyway, behind a studio where the applause had long since faded, he was just a man losing a war inside his own nervous system. His addiction to amphetamines and barbiturates was no longer a secret. It was a visible decay. It was eating his career, his relationships, and his mind. He had reached the point where the pills were no longer a way to enhance his life. They were the only way to endure it. He leaned against the damp brick wall. He reached into his right coat pocket. His hand was shaking. He pulled out a handful of pills. Uppers to force his exhausted heart to keep beating, downers to numb the frantic paranoia screaming in his skull. He raised his hand toward his mouth. He closed his eyes. He was ready to swallow them. He was ready to slip further down into the dark. He never finished the motion. Before the pills could touch his lips, another hand closed around his wrist. Came out of nowhere. There had been no footsteps, no sound of a door opening, just the sudden, absolute grip of another human being. It was not a violent grab. It did not pull or twist. It was simply immovable, like being caught by a branch of an ancient tree. Cash snapped his eyes open, his temper flaring. He was a big man, a man used to intimidating others with his sheer physical presence. He jerked his arm, expecting the stranger to let go. The stranger's hand did not move a fraction of an inch. Cash looked down. Standing there, perfectly still in the shadows of the alley, was a man in a simple jacket. He was half Cash's size. His face was calm, his breathing slow and completely silent. It was Bruce Lee. What happened in the next 10 minutes has rarely been discussed. It was not a fight. It was not a physical confrontation. It was the moment a man who was bent on destroying himself collided with a man who possessed absolute mastery over his own life force. And what Bruce Lee said to Johnny Cash in that dirty Los Angeles alley is a masterclass in the invisible power of true martial arts. To understand the tension of this moment, you have to understand the two forces that had just met in the dark. Johnny Cash was chaos. He was a storm of unregulated emotion, trauma, and chemical dependency. He was a man who felt everything so deeply that he had to drug himself just to survive the intensity of his own mind. Bruce Lee was water. He was discipline, focus, and total kinetic awareness. He was a man who had spent his entire life learning how to channel energy, how to direct it, and most importantly, how to stop it. Cash glared down at the smaller man. He said, "Let go of my arm, son." Bruce Lee did not let go. He did not tighten his grip either. He simply maintained the exact amount of pressure required to keep Cash's hand away from his mouth. Bruce Lee looked at the shaking hand. He looked at the pills resting in Cash's palm. Then he looked directly into Cash's eyes. He did not look at him like he was a celebrity. He did not look at him with pity. He looked at him the way a physician looks at a wound. Bruce Lee said, "You are fighting an enemy that is already inside the gates." Cash stopped pulling. The anger in his chest flickered, confused by the absolute lack of aggression in the man holding him. Cash said, "You don't know the first thing about what I'm fighting." Bruce Lee nodded slowly. He said, "I know that you are trying to kill the pain by killing the body. But the body is the only house you have. If you burn it down, where will the pain go? If you love rare and untold stories, subscribe. I post hidden history every day." The silence in the alley stretched. Cash's breathing was ragged. Bruce Lee's breathing was invisible. Cash looked at the grip on his wrist. It wasn't just strength. It was the quality of the strength. There was no tremor in Bruce Lee's arm. No tension. Just absolute, grounded reality. For a man who had spent years floating in a chemical haze, the physical reality of that grip was shocking. It was an anchor, Cash said. It's too loud in my head. I just need it to be quiet. Bruce Lee let the words hang in the damp air. He did not offer a 12-step program. He did not offer a moral lecture about drugs. He did not tell Johnny Cash about his potential or his responsibilities to his fans. Bruce Lee understood mechanics. He understood energy. He said, "You cannot quiet the mind by destroying the vessel. You are pouring poison into the river and expecting the water to stop flowing." He finally released Cash's wrist. He took a half-step back, giving the larger man his space. The choice was immediately returned to Cash. The pills were still in his hand. He was free to take them. Bruce Lee was not going to physically fight him for them. The physical intervention was over. The spiritual intervention had just begun. Bruce Lee looked at Cash's hand, still hovering midway in the air. He said, "True power is not the ability to endure the poison. True power is the ability to drop it." Johnny Cash stood perfectly still. He looked at the pills in his palm, the little chemical anchors that had been dragging him to the bottom of the ocean. He looked at the man standing in front of him, a man who possessed the kind of quiet, terrifying peace that Cash had been searching for his entire life. Cash realized in that exact second that his tough guy outlaw persona was a shield, that he was acting weak, that true strength was not surviving a chaotic, drug-fueled life. True strength was having the discipline to stand in the quiet darkness and not flinch. Cash turned his hand over. The pills fell to the wet pavement. They scattered into the dirty puddles of the alleyway. Bruce Lee did not smile. He did not congratulate him. He did not make a profound gesture of triumph. He simply nodded, a sign of profound respect from one warrior to another. Bruce Lee said, "The battle is not over. But tonight you kept the gates closed." He turned and walked down the alley, his footsteps completely silent, fading into the Los Angeles night. Here is what this story is really about. We look at icons like Johnny Cash and Bruce Lee as untouchable monoliths of pop culture. We see the music. We see the martial arts. But beneath the posters and the records, they were men navigating the same human darkness as the rest of us. Bruce Lee could have walked past that alley. He could have seen a junkie in the shadows and kept walking, protecting his own peace, his own career, his own trajectory. But martial arts, to Bruce Lee, was not about punching and kicking. It was about the preservation of life. It was about stepping into the flow of chaotic energy and redirecting it toward harmony. He saw a man destroying himself, and he offered the one thing that man needed more than a lecture or a hospital. He offered an anchor. He offered a moment of absolute, unshakable reality. Johnny Cash would face many more battles with his demons. The road to his sobriety was not a straight line. But he would later refer to that specific night, that specific encounter in the dark, as the moment the glass shattered. The moment he realized that his destruction was a choice, and that he had the power to simply open his hand and drop it. That is the legacy of true strength. Not the legend. The choice.